Hello, welcome back to the Housing Sector Podcast. Thank you to everyone who likes and subscribes. Apparently that's important. You can see my cat in the background, my biggest fan, except for everyone who's listening. And more of you are listening to these podcasts, I assume, as you're driving, walking, perhaps having a bath. Who knows what you're doing? But thank you very much indeed. If you could also add a comment or a like or share it with your friends. We're available, as far as I'm aware, on all audio platforms. But it's great to have so many of you listening, and thank you for everyone's support and comments that we constantly get. Today I am joined by Chris Carr. Thank you for joining me today, Chris. You have a long background of working in housing as a sort of solicitor, an in-house solicitor, is that correct?
Yeah, so I've worked in the housing sector for about 25 years now. Came sort of straight out of university, did the first job I could find and fell into the housing sector. Slightly unusual property lawyer because I trained actually in housing rather than just being a sort of straightforward property lawyer. And yeah, I've worked in-house, not specifically as a lawyer, but I worked as an asset manager for a local housing association I shall not name at the moment. And yeah, I've worked for the housing sector, housing associations for about 20 odd years now.
And we've come into contact because we have a mutual connection, and that's Leon, who has set up Property Crowd. What are you doing there at Property Crowd at the minute?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago when I was working in house, I came across Leon working to deal with sensors to put into houses. And we sort of got talking about how he could use those sensors to detect when a property was going to become damp, whether mold was coming, sort of in advance of it actually happening. And that led to various conversations of developing a building information management platform, which he then went away with and tried to sell to housing associations for about 12 to 18 months, but they just weren't interested in it. And he realised, and we've talked about it, that you could flip that information on its head and go and speak to tenants and ask them to provide the gaps in the data that we had, so that we would be able to essentially move into the Section 11 housing disrepair sector, representing tenants. And the goal is still the same, is that we want to get people's properties repaired. We believe people deserve safe, warm, secure homes. The difference is instead of housing associations working with us to make that happen, we've turned from the carrot to the stick approach, I suppose, and we'll bring legal proceedings against landlords, though ultimately the aim here is to try and get landlords to recognise their problems and work with us and with their tenants to get those resolved and not have to waste thousands of pounds on legal fees. The best will in the world, I would love to be out of a job because landlords are actually doing the job that they are supposed to be doing. So yeah, and the Crowd platform is there to give tenants access to information about their properties that they may or may not know, all publicly available data, and it allows them to come in on stream and add further data to that about their property, information that only they would know living there. It also allows them to bring in things such as disrepair issues with their landlord in general, where they can use the platform on a self-help basis to contact landlords to build up that information file on their side. As I think we're quite aware that keeping a record of communications with your landlord is not always necessarily the thing that any of us are good at, to be honest. And so the platform gives them a place to contact their landlord through that, and it will store that information for them if that's what they want to do. This is always going to be their data. It's not ours, and if they ask for it to be removed, it can be removed. But the idea is that we will grow this platform so that they will be able to approach landlords with sort of legally based communications that can trigger that process that takes us into the Section 11 claim, if it gets that far. And build up that wealth of knowledge so that when it does get to the point that the landlord is just simply ignoring them, they can say, I'd like to speak to a lawyer, and that whole file's there for whatever lawyer they choose to speak to. They can have that file with all of the evidence, because we know what lawyers are looking for, or rather Leon knows what lawyers are looking for. So the pictures and the statements that they are giving on this platform is what the lawyers are looking for, essentially. So they will get a treasure trove of information that may be more than just simply a tenant's photo reel. It's actually been looked at and curated, and we can use systems to look at those pictures and see where the problems are and deal with them, and get them in front of lawyers. So
just as a quick sidestep there, you can hear in the background there the rain, and it is Sunday the 15th of February, and we again besieged by rain, and that's the background noise you can hear. So look, if I'm a landlord, and I perhaps don't have the best understanding of my stock because I've inherited so much in mergers and whatnot, and I haven't got the time, the manpower, or the inclination to go out there and do a full stock survey, but I want that data. Surely you're providing quite a great tool here, aren't you?
You'd think, wouldn't you? That is an area where we would like to work with landlords on. So far, landlords are a little bit close-minded to this idea, see us just more as a yet another claims farm, yet another agitator that's out in the market to try and cause them problems, rather than an actual genuine source of information where we can connect them with their tenants in a way that perhaps their systems don't connect with their tenants.
But the clever bit that Leon's done, isn't it, is he's tapped into so many readily available sources, like the land directory, EPC data.
Yeah.
So it pulls it all in together, doesn't it? Now, as a resident, if I get a leaflet through my door, my understanding of when I last spoke to Leon about this is I take my smartphone and I register for it, and I can go around and go, here's some damp, here's some dangerous electrics, whatever the issue may be. And that's all then compiled into a report that can go to the landlord. It can go, if need be, onto sort of third-party lawyers. But as a tenant, I've got this one point there where my home is, and then that data is added, so we get a holistic view, if you like, of the wider picture.
Yeah, and landlords' platforms can often be confusing, can be difficult to communicate with, have processes built into them. This is about gathering the data in one place. And so, it can be used to sue your landlord. It can also be used to give your landlord information about your property. As I said at the beginning, we're not here specifically to sue landlords. It's something we can do. We're actually here to try and provide that conduit between landlords and their tenants to make them see what is going on in their properties, give the tenants a real voice.
I have seen on Leon's LinkedIn profile, though, that it's been more a case that you yourselves have come across letters that have been written to residents, sort of pointing you out as the enemy. Is that fair for me? Have I got the right image there?
No, you're absolutely right. The many landlords, far too many, have taken that letter and decided that rather than investigate who we are, they would much rather just call us a scam, call us any manner of names. Some of them have actually gone outright and put what can only be described as quite defamatory statements online about Property Crowd, and we are looking at what our options are with that now. Now we have the law firm that is Crowd Advisory active. We can look at what the options are in dealing with those false and, as I say, in some cases, defamatory statements.
And how have residents been responding to this?
Very well, actually. The ones that haven't sort of reported it to the landlords, and then landlords have put blogs out calling us scams, we've had quite a lot of sign-ups. We get something like about an 8% return on the letters we send out. The industry standard in this area is about 1 to 2%. So we're getting a much higher level of engagement with residents than perhaps other methods have been getting. And yeah, so it's definitely it's working. It's drawing out people with problems. So,
and do they have to wait for a letter, or can they sign up via the website?
I believe they can sign up via the website. Yeah, there is a method for doing that.
Okay, I will make sure the links and everything for that is in the comments field. How have we got to the point now, and you having been an in-house solicitor, to a certain degree for the last 20 years, how have we got to the point? Because Sue's at Shack has just published a great report. I think it's out now. If not, it will certainly be out by the time this podcast is, in where she's looking at people who have gone to first tier tribunal for service charge. And what she's finding is if you've got legal representation, it's over a 60% success rate. But of course, that's not easy for a lot of people. They can't afford it. There's no legal aid for that. But it is clear that when you don't have that support as you're going through the process, the housing associations win. And they win because they've got in-house legal experts. How can we redress this balance?
I would say it's not just the in-house legal experts, because actually not every housing association have in-house lawyers. They farm out to external providers quite often. It's just having professionals in place. Your average housing officer, asset manager, this is what they do 9 to 5, 5 days a week. That's their job. A tenant doesn't do that. So or a leasehold doesn't do that. That's not who they are. They are doing something else, and they have to take on this role. So it's much harder for them to fight their landlord, because the landlord has got all of that expertise they can draw on, all that experience they can draw on. So taking a case to court doesn't necessarily always have to involve them bringing in external counsel to deal with that. More often than not, they will do. But if let's take housing disrepair for an example. The government at the moment is trying to portray claims management firms as the enemy. They want to do everything they can to stop these claims management companies from being around. They want to try and limit referral fees, as they've done with quite a lot of referral arrangements. But the problem is that there are rogues out there. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't rogue claims management companies out there that don't treat residents correctly. But the point is that they provide a point of access into the system that residents may not be aware of. And it also allows them access to lawyers who can provide no win, no fee arrangements for various different matters. And the suggestion at the moment is that the government wants to raise the threshold for small claims, so that in essence, lawyers won't be able to recover their fees, so law firms will move out of the housing disrepair sector, except for the most high value claims. And that's going to ultimately harm residents, because if they can't access lawyers to give them that expertise, they're then going up against a career housing officer in a courtroom, someone who knows the judge, because they've been there probably 2 or 3 times a week on various different matters. They know what they're doing. They know how the process works. They know the procedure. They know what they need to be filing, when they need to be filing it. And for the average person, you don't come across those sorts of things. It's not to say that lawyers are the be all and end all to this situation. We do cause problems. There is not enough access to justice, in my opinion. But it also, by taking lawyers away, you're creating an unequal playing field.
How have we got to this point where we're supposed, we're as a resident, we're at the heart of everything our housing association wants to do. We're part of the processes in building the complaints. We listen, we want road shows, we want customer engagement. And yet when they get it, even for the likes of yourselves, or for the likes of vocal tenants, or for the likes of Shack, the response is usually, put up or shut up, legal threats, lawfare, as it's been labelled. And there is this incredible pushback from housing associations, which has created this naturally combative relationship. How did we get here?
I'm going to talk from an opinion rather in this sector to that question. So in my opinion, it comes down to a variety of factors. Finances is one of them. Housing associations are not as well funded as they used to be. Everything is done on a shoestring. And so rather than, these disrepair issues are imminently solvable. with a decent repair budget, where they actually respond to people's concerns, go out and repair the properties. And we don't need Section 11 after that point, because landlords are responding to the problems. But they don't have the budgets for that. And so instead, they have to rely on this sort of process where it can come out of a different budget, because now they've been sued, and so they have to settle that legal case. And it's actually just expending more money than just having done the work in the first place. And I think that's caused in a large part by the continuous squeezing of housing association funding from the national government. In the past, sort of like the 80s, 90s, noughties, they got a large amount of funding direct from the taxpayer. Now, most of that funding comes from cross-selling shared ownership properties, or having a private market sales process, borrowing money against their assets. So they've got new stakeholders in this who want returns on those investments. I think that that causes a big problem when it comes to having the funds available, because those funds are no longer driven at looking after the residents; they're driven at building more properties, and so repair budgets go down, development budgets go up. Then you've got the fact that, and this is from my experience, is that internally most housing associations are more concerned with measuring their performance than actually performing. There's more reports being filed on how we're doing rather than actually on what's being done. They're quite reticent over new technologies, new ideas, new thoughts. They sort of, everything's done the way it's always been done because that's the way it's been done. And I think that's part of the reason why property crowds suffered so much, is that kind of stuck in the old way of doing things process that they struggle to get out of, really. It's a combination of factors as to why we're here. And I think generally properties are getting older and they are getting harder to repair.
They're also built a lot cheaper, so the quality is not there from the start.
So you've got the older properties that are getting to that point in time. I've got an older property myself. The winter months is spent fighting off the damp and mold, and that's not because we've got structural issues. That's because of just the way we live. There's 5 of us living in a house, so there's nothing wrong with the property itself. But that's one of those things about the properties getting older. They were not designed to house the number of people they are in the modern world. And then as you say, you've got modern properties where we're using cheaper construction materials. We're using substandard construction. I think that's very evident from all of the fire safety issues we've had, is that actually the people building these properties aren't building them to the standards that need to be built. And that's causing properties to be more readily a problem, in terms of just the things like damp and mold can creep in more easily if they've not been fully sealed and what have you. I went out with a friend of mine who works in the aggregate sector, and he was telling me just something simple about how builders are not installing the tiles on driveways properly, so that they're supposed to leaving the gap for them to expand, and then putting the sand in between so they can drain. They're literally sort of pushing them back to get the stones together, and that's creating solid sections of ground where water's not draining through it. And it's all these little bits where properties are just not being built properly anymore.
Do you think? I mean, we had Labour background knocking on the door yesterday for our local councillor, it's Ed Turner and his crowd. And I think they genuinely mean well. And if you raise a complaint about your housing association, they sort of, oh yeah, well, we sent an email, but they're rather reluctant. Do you think that's because the MPs and the politicians have made this sort of Faustian pact where we need new homes, so we've got to play nice with these guys, and we've cut their budget, so therefore we're kind of indebted to them, and if they can build it cheap, then build it cheap?
To an extent, I think part of the problem with government is they don't understand the problems. They don't understand what's going on. And that's largely due to the fact that we have had something like 15 or 16 housing secretaries in the last 15 years.
Yeah, yeah.
No one's there long enough to actually sit down and understand the problems and work with the sector to actually realise where the problems lie. Their solution to everything is build more, sell more, build more, sell more. And Brexit caused a problem with that. We lost a lot of skilled labourers who didn't want to work, who didn't or weren't eligible to work here anymore. And so the quality of what we're building has gone down. We've got this, as I say, this relentless pressure. We need to build 300,000, I think it is at the moment, is their target per year. We haven't built that level for 50 years nearly now. Not since we were building council houses, where we're building enough to sustain the amount of houses, new houses we need every year. I think that they're pushing that. You're right. They work with house developers, they work with housing associations who are in essence private entities. They have a profit motive. Yes, housing associations aren't profit making entities, but they also have to look after their budgets properly. So, you know, the government is trying to make private entities fill the gap that the government used to fill itself with council housing. I'm not saying council housing was always the best constructed going, but it solved a problem that we did have. And as I say, I don't think genuinely the government fully understand the problem, because they're not willing to listen. They're not actually willing to sit down and do the hard work to fix the problems.
I mean, I suppose, you know, to shed some reason on that for them, they've just got so many problems, haven't they? I mean, each successive government inherits a load more problems, and we just can't fight our way out of it. And problems quickly disappear. You remember the concrete in schools where school roofs are falling in, and now we don't talk about that anymore. You know,
we've got the concrete in schools, and to an extent, the fire safety, the cladding issues is going a different way. Now we've had this sort of 10 years nearly of we must remove all the cladding to, well, actually let's enshrine in law a process where we do a risk assessment based on how likely it is for a building to catch fire, and then if it's kind of low likely, then we can leave that dangerous cladding on the building, which is essentially where we were before Grenfell. We've gone back a step. I think the changes in BSA probably went too far. They created far too much red tape and far too much process, and didn't focus enough on actually solving the problems. But yeah, they now seem to be taking a backward step to a process where it's based on the risk profile of the building, which might be sensible, but it doesn't feel sensible to me. It feels like we're sacrificing people again to a system built for profit. But yeah, like you say, nothing works properly. Nothing has worked properly for a long time. You can look into any sector and you can say, yeah, that's broken, it needs fixing. And successive governments haven't done anything to really fix that. We get a lot of tinkering around the edges, not an awful lot of root and branch reform that we actually need.
So when we say, and this is, again, as we're talking, it's opinions, it's not actually grounded in fact, but it's certainly my opinion. We have, you know, with Grenfell, there's been no one that's been prosecuted, no one served time for corporate manslaughter. And when with housing associations, you have CEOs in place, they fail and fail and fail and fail, complaints go through the roof, they don't get moved on, they're still in the same roles, and everyone just carries on. And there's a, you know, when we have a new government come in, you know, 150, 200 people lose their job. But in the meantime, everyone who works in the background just carries on as normal, all those civil servants. And do you think that's the same with housing associations? You said nothing's changed, we're not improving. And with the likes of the Chartered Institute of Housing, we've got all this funding that goes off to events that slows down procurement. You can only get into procurement section if you're at the event supporting the thing. And it's that same pool of people protecting each other, but of course at the cost of the resident, and that's safety. And Matt Hodges, who we've had on the podcast before, was talking about the amount of people who are evacuated from their homes that are unsafe. And it doesn't make the national press. So we're all keeping quiet about the shortfallings, And when, a building, a block of flats, a home is unsafe, we'll keep quiet, just move them on into hotels. So there's no
But
real question there. Sorry, Chris, I've just ranted and raved as I tend to do. But
and I completely agree. Grenfell was something that came to the national attention because of what happened there. Because people died, and if you've if you've watched the documentaries, if you've read Peter Aps's book about it, you can see. I've never read a book about a tragedy where you come to the conclusion that it's not just one failure here. Everyone and everything involved
yeah,
in that cladding crisis was at fault. The fact there's been no prosecutions is just it's unjust in it makes me angry, to be honest
yeah,
with you. And having so as part of my role in the asset management field is actually looking into these the buildings and how they were constructed and seeing how badly they were put together. And the people I work with said they don't think there is a single building that doesn't have some sort of fire safety problem with it because the fire breaks haven't been installed properly, the cladding hasn't been fitted properly, and the cost of repairing this is just beyond anything that it would bankrupt the housing sector. That's how bad it could be. I agree. Yeah, I think there's not enough change. I don't want to get to a system where everyone changes every 5 years, but
no, I agree
there
with
is an
you on
awful
that.
lot of people that just go that's been their job, and maybe they there is a value in that sort of continued expertise, but when that continued expertise isn't actually moving the dial in any direction, what's the value in any of that, really?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? And we seem to just keep going around and round in circles. I've been talking about this for 10 years now, and it's gone from idle legal threats to legal just to keep thinking, hang on a minute, why are you trying to silence me and
Yeah.
so many others when, actually we're talking the truth? And it seems to be, look the other way. But as we've said, the government's got so many problems on, what can it do? It certainly
But
can't fix the potholes.
you're the thorn in the side that they don't appreciate because you're highlighting to them their faults, and they'd rather believe that they're the best organization in the world. They get awards, they go to award ceremonies, get a nice shiny trophy, they have patting on the back ceremonies. I speak from experience. The legal profession is terrible for it. We have semi sort of quarterly award ceremonies where we pat each other on the back for doing the best deals, and it's like, what have you actually done other than make a very rich person even richer, sort of thing? And that's what we're celebrating. And it's similar in the housing sector. We go to these conferences, like you say, people get in front of housing associations because they are at these conferences, they are there, they're exhibiting, they've spent thousands and thousands of pounds on a stand so they can exhibit to the people that are there. And having seen the procurement process from both sides, both externally and internally, far too much focus is put on how cheap we can deliver this and not on who can provide the best service. One of the biggest problems with the cladding issue was that everyone went to the cheapest manufacturer of the cladding rather than the people that knew what they were doing. And it's the people that knew what they were doing who are still there today and fixing the problem of all the companies that were men of straw and folded.
I've got, and I need to be careful what I say here. I have some whistleblowers who keep coming forward to me, and their argument is that they were in senior roles, but when they've pushed back or they've said, look, this is an issue, they themselves have been silenced and sidelined.
I can
Yeah,
believe that totally. It's and all comes back to the funding point again. Is that you're raising issues that are a problem. I believe that a lot of the senior people um, that have made these decisions are aware that these are problems and they should be dealing with it, but they don't have the funding to deal with it. So they need to find a different way to deal with that. And I think people within organizations suffer the same fate. You find yourself banging your head because you're having discussions with senior management and they're going nowhere. And then you have another meeting in 2 weeks to have the same discussion to not move anything forward again because they're too busy measuring the performance rather than actually performing.
You say measuring, I would use the word manipulating stats and figures for their PDFs. And of course that fatigue is also most prevalent in the front line, where you've got customer service agents answering the phones to the same person with the same leak, and the housing officers, who seem to be a dying breed. There's less and less of them, but they too have to face it on the ground. Of course, they get burnout and fatigue and exhaustion. And the training that seems to be there, although we pay thousands to the Chartered Institute of Housing for them to put things after their names in their email signatures, you then see them online asking simple questions, and you think, well, hang on a minute, how much are we paying for this training here? You know, it's not filtering down to those frontline staff who need it the most. And yet, in the meantime, we've got budgets going on, as you say, award ceremonies, and the communications team, who are teams that have grown over the last 10 years, are employed simply to control that narrative. You know, surely that wage would be better given it to someone in a van with a ladder and some tools.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there we go. That's a nice place to end it, on half an hour, and we've got an absolute agreement with something I've said, even as one of my opinions. Chris, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. I will get those links up, and perhaps we'll get Leon on here so we can talk about property crowds some more. But in the meantime, thank you very much indeed for giving up your time today. It's been great talking to you.
It's been good talking to you too.
Thanks, mate.